Hey guys, welcome to this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday. Now before we begin, if you're new to our YouTube channel, these videos are all about answering your health related questions. So if you have a question concerning your health, something regarding health in general, diet, nutrition, supplements, herbalism, or really anything related to health and wellness, and you would like our help in answering your questions, all you have to do is leave those questions in the comment section below, and we'll be answering those based on popularity, the questions that we feel are going to be the most beneficial to the group overall, and of course the questions that we are capable of answering. Now, something else really great about these videos is that every week from the comment section, we select one lucky person to win a free bag of tonic herbs or medicinal mushrooms. And even if you don't have a health question for us this week, but you're still interested in being entered to win some free herbs or mushrooms, all you have to do is simply make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and then just drop any comment in the comment section below. And with all that being said, let's get to this week's questions. All right, so taking a look at our first question, this question reads, "My eyes often get fuzzy. What is useful to understand about this? Thanks." So by fuzzy, I'm assuming that you mean that your eyes or vision gets blurry. And this is a common symptom of high blood pressure or hypertension, which is often one of the many symptoms of hyperaldosteronism, or really high levels of the adrenal stress hormone aldosterone. So under various forms of stress, the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, secrete stress hormones, and one of them is aldosterone. And what aldosterone does is it affects the mineral balance and fluid balance of the body. So specifically speaking, aldosterone, when elevated or secreted by the adrenals or kidneys, is going to cause your body to reabsorb both sodium and water and deplete the potassium through the excretion of urine, so through urination. So really what aldosterone is doing is causing water retention or fluid retention. And this is going to occur throughout the entire body and the various tissues. So it's a cause for edema, in other words, which you'll see in hypothyroidism because of the fact that the hormones tend to be more elevated on the stress side of things. So there's higher levels of cortisol and aldosterone under hypothyroidism. But all sorts of stress. So the stress of pregnancy, the stress of aging, intense exercise stress, really any sort of chronic stress that causes the adrenals to overproduce things like aldosterone often leads to water retention or edema. So in the case of blurred vision, I think one of the reasons that you see blurred vision as a symptom of hypertension is because of the fact that the high aldosterone that drives hypertension is causing the eye tissue itself to actually become more edemic and basically holding on to more water than normal. So in this way, I think if your eyes are, waterlogged and they're holding on to more fluid, your vision is going to be affected negatively. And I think there's research that talks about this. If I can find it, I'll be sure to link it beneath this video so you can read a bit more. But the very refined or simplified version of this is that usually in blurred vision, other than maybe some damage that's being done to the actual eye itself, usually what's happening is the eye tissue is accumulating water. And also keep in mind that edema and the accumulation of water into the tissue can actually lead to inflammation, which would damage the tissue also. So usually edema precedes all sorts of inflammation and fibrosis. So whether your blurred vision is from more long-term inflammation, in either case, there's probably underlying edema or water retention, which is driven by the stress hormone aldosterone. So this is something that, again, you see in people that are diabetic or hypertensive, you see it in pregnancy, and you see it in all cases of stress. And really the thing you're going to want to do, the secret to correcting hypertension is to correct the hyperaldosteronism, or the really high levels of aldosterone. And what is generally taught is to avoid the consumption of salt, so salt restriction. And this is because of the idea that under hypertension, your body's holding on to more sodium. So the last thing you want to do is to consume it. But actually, the fact of the matter is salt is actually going to keep your aldosterone levels low or regulated and make sure that your body isn't using up or reabsorbing the sodium in the body. So in other words, sodium is antagonistic to aldosterone. It's going to bring down the levels of aldosterone and make sure that your body's not overproducing it. Very similar to the way that under stress, your blood sugar tends to drop, and a lot of people are told to not consume sugar, but the fact of the matter is, what happens when you are stressed out is your cortisol goes up and the blood sugar drops, and taking in sugar can actually bring down the cortisol and correct the low blood sugar. So this is why people that get stressed out tend to crave sugary products or sugar of some sort, because when your body is craving sugar, it's really what's happening is your body's breaking down the other tissues to make sugar to cope with stress. So this is your body's natural way, or it's a sort of a built-in defense mechanism against the destructive effects of stress. You crave salt and sugar when you're stressed out because your body depletes salt and sugar rapidly and uses them more rapidly under stress. So your body's trying to make sure you replenish those things before your body starts getting salt and sugar through more destructive mechanisms like breaking down your tissues or chronically elevating stress hormones like aldosterone. So in summary, blurred vision, or fuzzy vision as you put it, could be caused by high levels of aldosterone, which are causing your eye tissue to become swelled up or waterlogged. And the way to correct it is to just take in more salt. And this should correct the high levels of aldosterone and adrenaline, and it should, over the long term, correct a lot of the symptoms of high aldosterone, one of them being blurry vision. All right, getting to our second question. I've answered this question before, but not in an FAQ. I think I've talked about it just on my own as a tip for lowering estrogen in a lot of videos. And the question reads, do all alcoholic drinks have estrogen, or is it only in the form of beer? Thanks. So in a few of our videos on how to lower estrogen, or if you're trying to correct estrogen dominance, or if you have any estrogen-driven condition like PCOS or prostate enlargement or thyroid issues, one of the things you're going to want to do is avoid the consumption of all alcoholic beverages, at least until you correct the issue. And then from that point, if you want to moderately consume alcohol, then to answer your question, there are certain alcoholic beverages that have less of an estrogenic effect. So the answer to your question is yes, all alcoholic beverages have estrogen in them. And this is because of the fact that the yeast that produce alcohol, basically the bacteria and yeast that consume the sugars, whether that's through the consumption of the sugars that are in the grains used to make grain-based alcohol, or the grains used to make beer, grapes used to make wine, corn or potatoes used to make gluten-free liquors or alcohols. As the yeast consume up these sugars, they produce reproductive estradiol, so that way themselves can actually reproduce, proliferate, and multiply, which will produce not just more yeast, but obviously more alcohol. So in other words, the yeast that consume the sugar in alcoholic beverages that produce alcohol also produce estrogen. So in this way, all alcoholic beverages are going to contain some level of estrogen. However, there are some that contain more or less. So as mentioned, beer is going to be probably the most estrogenic alcoholic beverage that you can consume, because it not only has the reproductive estrogen from the yeast that make the beer, but most beers are made using hops, which is incredibly phytoestrogenic, and also various grains like barley and other grains that also have phytoestrogenic properties. So although phytoestrogens are not as potent as, let's say, xenoestrogens or the actual reproductive estradiol from the yeast, it's still going to contribute to the overall estrogen load of that beverage. So I would avoid consuming most beers, especially IPAs or beers that contain a high level of hops, very hoppy beers. And most beer in general are just going to be, best not consumed or greatly moderating your consumption of if you're trying to regulate estrogen-driven conditions. Otherwise, from my research and from my memory, the least estrogenic alcoholic beverages are going to be very long distilled and clear liquors. So clear distilled tequila and potato vodka as prime examples. So those are going to be the least estrogenic. They're not going to contain, the phytoestrogen bases. Potatoes and the agave are not really estrogenic. And also the distillation of this product or this beverage is going to also minimize the estrogen production from the reproductive yeast, and it could possibly even kill some of them off. So those are the ones to consume in moderation. But again, overall, I would just really recommend not consuming alcohol, especially if you're dealing with any sort of health issues, hypothyroidism, PCOS, fertility problems, sexual health issues, anything related to estrogen dominance. You're really going to want to avoid consuming any sort of alcohol altogether. And one tip that I have, a little piece of information here, is that other than drinking alcohol for social reasons, just to sort of socialize with people, one of the major reasons that people consume alcohol is to act sort of as a stress relief. And this is because alcohol in a small amount can actually stimulate the production of GABA, which will antagonize cortisol. So in this way, consuming alcohol can be a stress relief by lowering the production of cortisol by stimulating GABA. Unfortunately, most alcohol has more toxic and negative effects than it does beneficial ones. So for example, as we're talking about, most alcohol contains estrogen, and estrogen can actually stimulate the production of more cortisol. So although it might have a very short-term anti-stress effect, down the line, consuming too much of it or just consuming it every day is going to actually just contribute to higher levels of stress in your body. And there are so many other ways that are non-toxic and safe to boost GABA production and lower cortisol. We have an entire video on various herbs and supplements that help to increase GABA, which will also lower cortisol. So instead of relying on this, I'd recommend an herb like ashwagandha, which is going to not just increase GABA, but also lower cortisol. So taking a nightcap of ashwagandha in some sort of tonic form is going to be much safer and non-toxic and very beneficial for correcting stress, especially compared to something like consuming alcohol. All right, answering one and final question. This question is pretty straightforward. It reads, what's the link between compromised digestion and poor or broken sleep? Okay, so I recently was talking about the various symptoms that can occur from the loss of sleep or the chronic deprivation of sleep. And one thing you're going to see is digestive issues. This is probably actually going to be the most predominant symptom that you see when your sleep is compromised. Most people, they don't get good enough sleep. They wake up and they have no appetite. And if they do eat, they become sort of instantly bloated and they are often constipated. So if you don't get a good night's sleep, you're probably going to relate and find that, you wake up and you don't really have a normal irregular bowel movement. You're more or less constipated. Maybe your appetite's low or suppressed. And if you do eat, you might find that you're bloated all day long throughout the day. And there is a very simple explanation for this. There's two ways to look at this. First and foremost, the hormonal impact of the loss of sleep. When you wake up and you're not rested entirely, your body is more stressed. So you tend to be producing more cortisol, which is going to antagonize or oppose thyroid function. And the thyroid gland is what regulates and drives the digestive processes. So when your thyroid's low, this means you're going to have a less efficient digestive system. Your digestive system becomes weaker in all ways. So you produce less stomach acid and less digestive enzymes. Your transit time slows down, so you become more constipated. And as a result of, the inability to break down your food properly and poor transit time, your body will not properly break down its food, which is going to lead to an overgrowth of bacteria in your intestines, the production of gas, inflammation, and combined, this is going to lead to various digestive symptoms, but most predominantly, you're going to notice that you're bloated all the time. So this is one way that the loss of sleep can impair digestion, is by increasing the production of stress hormones and slowing down thyroid function. Another way of looking at it is the effect that the loss of sleep can have on your central nervous system. So your digestive system is ruled by the autonomic or enteric nervous system. This is the automatic nervous system or mind of the body. This is, when you talk about the body having a mind of its own, this is a prime example. The digestive processes are not something you actively think about. Your body just breaks down your food itself. It assimilates nutrients. It discards waste. You don't have to actively think about this. So it's really nice that your body has this mind of its own in this way. However, the central nervous system can directly affect the autonomic nervous system. And there's two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, which are affected by you and your actions. So your thoughts and emotions, your environment, your diet, your lifestyle, your exercise routine, all these things can stimulate either the sympathetic nervous nervous system, which is the stress system of the nervous system, or the parasympathetic, which is the relaxed system of the nervous system. And in general, you want to be in this parasympathetic state in order to digest your food. It's often literally referred to as the rest and digest phase or branch of your nervous system, whereas the sympathetic nervous system is referred to as the fight or flight branch, which is the stress response. So if you're in this sympathetic state, then your digestive processes shut down for the sake of survival. It takes a lot of energy to digest your food and assimilate nutrients and discard waste. And if you're stressed out, your body's going to want to shift its energy reserves and stores and its ability to surviving that stress or escaping that stress. So in this way, it's a very sort of primal thing. If you're not getting good sleep, your body's going to be more in a stress state, and it's not going to really be focused on digesting food. It's going to be focused on coping with the stress and handling it. So usually, if you're experiencing these sorts of issues, it's going to be very important you focus on getting good quality sleep. It's not just imperative for improving digestive health, but your health overall. So this is something we talk about in great detail in the Perfect Digestion course. If you're interested in improving your digestive health and function, you have to find some ways to improve your sleep quality. So this is something that we give tips on in this video here. But in general, the things you're going to want to do to improve your sleep quality is just reduce all of your stressors. So that includes avoiding, stressful topics of thought. So don't think about your relationship and financial stress before bed and, end of life crises before bed. Don't exercise intensely before bed. Don't watch scary movies or do anything that's going to overstimulate you before bed. Instead, focus on things that are relaxing. Read a relaxing book, set some positive goals or intentions before bed. Take a bath. Rather than being under bright fluorescent lights, light some candles or just dim the lights so that way you're also not getting stimulated by bright light, which could activate the further production of cortisol and stress hormones. These are all just very simple things you can do to put your body in a more relaxed state so you can fall asleep and stay asleep. Otherwise, again, for more tips on improving sleep health overall, for dietary tips, lifestyle, and herbal and supplemental tips, definitely be sure to check out the Perfect Digestion course. It's a complete and comprehensive course. It'll answer all of your questions and takes care of all that research and busy work that you would have to do otherwise to figure out what to do or what not to do to improve your sleep and therefore improve your digestion. All right, guys, that brings this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday to a close. Remember, if you're interested in winning some free herbs or mushrooms, all you have to do to be entered to win is make sure that you have subscribed to our YouTube channel, you've given this video a thumbs up, and then just drop a comment or question in the comment section below. Otherwise, for learning more beyond this YouTube channel, or for referencing any of the resources that we mentioned throughout this video, that includes links to studies, various herbs, or online courses, you can find all of that information in the description box below.